I would, just like to set it up a little bit, just by saying that, it's still shocking to me that 2.3 million Americans are incarcerated, which happens to be the biggest population in the world, even more so than China and so on. So we have a huge amount of our population that have criminal records. In fact, it's 1 in 3 adults have criminal records. So there is a lot of opportunity to manage this population in a very creative way, because there is obviously some considerable talent and great human capital in this community. And really that's what led us to today's conversation. Greyston Bakery are famous for employing people that are looking for a second chance. And I'm really, it's a great honour and a pleasure to have both CEO Joe Kenner and the director of that movement, Sara Marcus, on board on the call today. So I might just pass it over to you, Joe. Just tell us a little bit about what it is that makes open hiring such a unique employment framework.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you to the Conscious Capitalism team for having Sara and I on board. Let me just give you a little bit of background about Greyston. Normally, if we were in a room, I'd ask everybody how many people have heard of Greyston, but I just want to give you a little bit of background on who we are here in Southwest Yonkers. We're a social enterprise located just north of the city and right next door to Bronx, New York. And we practice a very radical idea called open hiring. And I like to say it's a practice as well as a philosophy. You see the practice being played out at our for-profit entity called Greyston Bakery. And if any of you have ever had a pint of Ben & Jerry's chocolate fudge brownie or half baked or Netflix and chilled or Justice Remix, you have had some of our brownie inclusions. We have been partnering with Ben & Jerry since 1987. We've been around since 1982, practicing open hiring, but we also sell our brownies online at greyston.org, so you can order the single-serve brownies as well. We actually have a new flavor coming out. Actually, it is out in Whole Foods. It's a vegan birthday cake blondie. It's amazing. So if you haven't had it, eat 1 or 10 because they are just that good. The one thing I would say about open hiring and getting to your point about just the inclusive economy movement that Conscious Capitalism has been pushing for so many years, the model it's incredible, simple yet profound, but all it entails is someone putting their name on a list at our bakery. And when the next job becomes available, that person gets that job. We don't do interviews, we don't do background checks. The next person on the list is the next person that reports to orientation. That's your first day on the job. It's your first day of getting paid, access to benefits, union membership, 401k, and training. And we support all of our what we call apprentices. It's a 6 to 9 month program, but we support all of our apprentices, what we call a employment path maker. And this is a partnership we developed with one of the largest mental health providers in Westchester County, New York, which is where we are, Westchester Jewish Community Services. And it's a social worker that sits at our bakery. And the task of the path maker is to make sure that our bakers are getting all the access to the things that they need that can make them successful, not just on the job, but really in life. Because we found that some of the life issues impacts the work issues. Whether it's housing, and we've talked about that a little bit before this call, but transportation, child support, child care, domestic violence, we've dealt with that. Some folks, just immigration issues, we've dealt with that. So that's the job of the employment path maker, to just make sure that people are getting those needs met in a very confidential way, but more importantly, in a way that makes sure that, they're productive, they're successful on the job, and that they're thriving. And like I said, it's about thriving, not just on the job, but really thriving at home, because really the two worlds come together sometimes and can be in pretty dramatic ways. So we want to make sure that our folks are just accessing those services and making sure that we're getting brownies out the door, but that they're being taken care of in a more holistic way. And that one thing I would say, particularly in this environment that we find ourselves in, whether it's COVID or the social unrest, now more than ever, a model like open hiring is needed. for companies all across, not just this country, but I would say around the world. And Sara can talk about some of the projects that are happening right now in places like the Netherlands. We're doing things in Rochester, New York, had a great project with the body shop in North Carolina, and many others. Almost 30 companies are talking to us about what open hiring might look like for them. So, the philosophy, and that's the practice, and the philosophy is just all about non-judgment. It's all about having folks who've made the choice that, they want something better for themselves. And it's our job as employers, as business leaders, to give that access and that opportunity of employment to those who are ready to work, who want to turn their lives around and want something better for themselves. And we'll give you that opportunity, but it's up to you to really make it successful and avail yourself to the training, to the path maker, and to whatever else you need to be successful. And we'll make that investment in you. And that's what path making means to us. We know that everybody has a God-given gift and talent to contribute to this world, to this society, and it's up to us to make sure we invest in that and to make sure that you're successful. So it's this time more than ever, I just think that we strongly believe this, that we need more companies to be inclusive about their hiring practices, to really have a mind shift about how can we be more holistic in our approach to human capital and talent management so that we can give more opportunities to folks. As we were talking earlier, we only have about 70 jobs at the bakery to give at any given point in time, but it would be great if other companies, maybe they have 10, another company has 50, maybe another one has 1,000 that could do open hiring. Just think of the doors of opportunity that could be open to people, I will add, that were once considered unemployable, but particularly in our environment, in our context at Greyston Bakery, they're now called essential because we were operating throughout this entire pandemic when the great thing about being a part of a global supply chain for someone who makes ice cream is that people were snacking a lot. And our folks, our breakers, our apprentices were cranking away, 6, sometimes 7 days a week and, at record numbers, making products for a world-class organization like Ben & Jerry's, Unilever, or Whole Foods. And they were doing it very well, motivated, confident. Yes, we had some tough times. It was frustrating, like many of you. We were scared. We didn't know what was going to happen next. People were concerned for their families. We were concerned for our operations, but we buckled down. Both our foundation as well as the bakery were retrofitted for a COVID environment. And, knock on wood, we didn't lose anybody during this whole pandemic. And we still were able to produce and to meet the needs of our number one customer, which was Ben & Jerry's. So I am just so proud of the team. We thank them every chance we get. I just received a video thank you from Matthew McCarthy, who's the CEO of Ben & Jerry's, just singing the praises of the bakery team. And he held up about a pint of chocolate fudge brownie just to tell the folks, like, this is why you guys come to work. We've got the strong demand, and they were able to meet the challenge. And again, the once unemployable, now essential, doing a great job. We want others to tell that story with us. We don't want to be unique in that sense. We want other folks to really adopt the model, think about how it could be applied to their organization, and really just help us spread the word. But that was probably a very long answer to your question there, Glenn.
No, I love that once unemployable, now essential is a tremendous shift, and I'm just taking notes on that one. And Sara, did you want to talk a little bit about your involvement, because it's at a slightly different level? I'd love to hear that.
Sure. Thank you, Glenn, and to the whole Conscious Capitalism Connecticut team for having us on today. It's a pleasure to be with you all. So I'm with the Center for Open Hiring, which is a part of the nonprofit side of Greyston. And the center was really born out of a desire to scale our mission. And as Joe said, we can only provide 70-ish jobs at our bakery, but we would get questions over the years. I mean, we've been doing this since the 80s, so we'd get questions. Well, that sounds crazy. Like, how do you do that? And so 2 years ago, the decision was made to launch the center with the intent of finding other employers to replicate our model, and kind of codifying like what makes it successful in Greyston and what are sort of best practices for other companies to take on. So I joined about a year ago to support those efforts. And it's been an interesting journey. I mean, I think obviously the economy has changed drastically, and earlier in the days of the center, and you know, as soon recently as a few months ago, with sub 3% unemployment numbers in certain areas, some companies came to us because they were just desperate to find more people, and we obviously kind of evangelized open hiring to them. But what's been really interesting is to find the conscious businesses, these purpose-driven companies. Those have been the ones that have really leaned into this, and who even today, when unemployment is above 15% in some places, really see that as, okay, well then the need is even greater for those who don't make it past traditional employment screens to gain access to employment. And they're becoming aware that those screens don't necessarily make a lot of sense. And so they're continuing to lean into the model. The business case, you know, we know the business case has to be there for a company to sign on to this. And so we definitely spent a lot of our, you know, effort making that case. And essentially it's that companies spend so much time and so much money screening people out, even for entry-level jobs, and yet still face incredibly high rates of turnover, especially when you're talking about industries like manufacturing, distribution, warehousing, food service, the retail sector. Turnover is a huge concern, and yet so much money, again, is spent on things like background checks, on interviews, on you know, looking at resumes. And so our thesis is that, well, we actually spend nothing on any of that. We just have people come and sign up on a list, and at any given time we have many people that we can call up and say, come to work next week or tomorrow, whenever it is. And that instead we invest those resources in some of what Joe was describing, in that wraparound support, in onboarding and training, soft skills and hard skills, because it's one thing to know the job, but it's another to know how to communicate with your team member. And so this idea of like shifting resources is kind of where we make the pitch to businesses. In terms of how this has actually gotten replicated, Joe mentioned our partnership with the Body Shop. That's been kind of the most public pilot we've had, and biggest pilot that we've had. They're, you know, cosmetics company that are interesting journey, where they were founded around the same time as Greyston in the 80s by Anita Roddick, a very kind of purpose-driven leader who really invented this idea of like cruelty-free, animal testing-free products before it was, you know, widespread. And then in the intervening years, the Body Shop kind of got away from that purpose and mission. They're pretty open about this. They were bought by L'Oreal, underneath which they really were more focused on more traditional business practices, and then got resold in 2017 to a new owner. And so over the last couple of years, they've been on this journey of how do we get back to our roots and to our identity as a purpose-driven brand, and what does that look like for all of our different functions? And so within that context, the HR team learned about open hiring and said, this is what we have to do. Their new actual company purpose statement is to build a fairer and more beautiful world. And so they said this just aligns so perfectly. And so they decided to launch it in their distribution center, which is down in Raleigh-Durham and serves the entire continent of North America. They did it with their seasonal employment. They have to hire about 200 people for the holiday season. And they were previously doing background checks and drug screens and looking for high school diplomas. They stripped away all of that. They went to, you know, are you authorized to work in the US? Which we asked too, by the way. We've gotten the question. But yes, we are, you know, we would be shut down otherwise. Are you authorized to work in the US? Can you lift up to 50 pounds, and can you stand for up to 8 hours? And if the answers were yes, then you were in. And incredibly, they saw their turnover go down 60% year over year, and their productivity increased 13%. And so I think that sort of goes to show when, you know, these practices really don't make sense. And then I think the kind of softer benefits were really compelling for us to see. I think when you're in a distribution center, it can be very disconnected from the end product, from the end consumer. And suddenly, they certainly had to do a lot of work to get buy-in from everyone. And I would say that's one of the things we tell businesses, like, if you're going to do this, like, you have to work with all of your stakeholders, all of your different functions and employee sets to really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what is open hiring and what is it not. They did a lot of that work because there were certainly concerns, and we went down there and we heard some of the concerns. But then we also heard the supervisors say, hey, like, I know someone that really could benefit from a job here, or I have an organization that I volunteer with that has folks that like can't get jobs here, and I would love for them to come work here. And so these frontline supervisors who previously were, you know, moving boxes around suddenly were changing lives. And I thought that was a really exciting and compelling kind of side benefit, but really could be transformative for a company and building culture and building purpose into the day-to-day work of all of their employees, because we all want to come to work every day and feel like we're doing something meaningful. So that we had that pilot. We've had a couple of others that have sort of just gotten started. The Netherlands ones that Joe was referring to, we have a partner foundation that learned about open hiring, was like, we need this in the Netherlands. Very different environment there. You know, much lower rates of incarceration, but other employee groups that are not getting access to employment. Actually was interesting with their seat. So they've launched it with, they have now 13 companies that are doing open hiring over there. And they have that path maker that Joe described. It's a shared resource across a network of employers that works when you're a small region. Doesn't necessarily work here, but that's why we're looking at some regional hubs for open hiring, like Rochester. They're seeing, in terms of who's actually coming through, they're seeing a lot of older folks who their social safety net in Netherlands is much better than here, and many people don't have to work. And there's like a lot of ageism. And so people that are above a certain, like, you know, in their 50s, so not old, aren't gaining access to jobs and would go out to interview after interview and not get jobs. So they would just give up because they didn't necessarily have to work, but wanted to and had skills. And so different dynamics there. But I think there's a real appetite for this. And then here we're obviously in this moment where every CEO is waking up, unfortunately, to the, you know, these systemic inequities and racial inequities that have been present for centuries, and are making statements about how we have to do better. And there's a lot of questions of like, okay, well, what does that mean? How do you do that? And so we are cautiously optimistic that people are really looking for solutions and tangible ways that they can do better, and that hiring is like the way that CEOs can do it kind of on their own. Like, it's not open hiring is not rocket science. It's not that hard. And you know, solving systemic racism is a hard problem, and police brutality, those are hard problems. And this is one way to do that, and it's seemingly simple. So we are hopeful and optimistic that more businesses will lean into this. And but we know there will be tough questions, and so I'll stop there. And you know, I think, Glenn, if you want to, you know, Glenn, I'll pass it back to you. Glenn, you're on mute.
So there's a few things in the chat about, one is a question about standards. One is a question about employee turnover and how that's changed over the years. And then a call out to B Corps and how they seem to be showing up on the radar screen in this conversation. And we have had another town hall session devoted to the B Corps certification process. So it's kind of cool to see the those threads picking back up. So whichever one you want to dive into.
I could take both of those, both the standards one and the turnover, and Sarah, you can chime in. And let me set some context, because these are questions we get a lot when it comes to the standards, and definitely turnover. That's one that comes up a lot. One of the things I always like to say, and remember what I said in the beginning, you know, our customers are Ben & Jerry's, Unilever, Whole Foods. These are high quality, top notch, you know, best in class customers. They do not let up on us. We have to deliver a very high quality product at the highest standards. We have goods manufacturing practices that must be adhered to, food standards, safety standards, just general workplace employment practices standards that must be adhered to. As I said in the beginning, that this is an opportunity. It's not a promise. I was a deputy commissioner of social services. I worked with this population before, and I know we use terms like wraparound services and a lot of touchy-feely terms that makes it sound like this is a kumbaya moment. But at the end of the day, this is a business. We are a social enterprise. We are conscious. We are purpose-driven, but it still is a business, and you must adhere to the standards. You cannot show up on the floor wearing, rings and things on your wrist or on your ears. We have standards. There is a whole point system, we call it, that folks must adhere to. And the idea is not to have many points, or yes, we'll have to part our ways. And we, as we say, we don't judge you when you come through the door. And if you have to leave involuntarily, we will not judge you on the way out the door. But we do have standards. And this is a business that needs to make sure that we're delivering a high quality product. And if we can't adhere to those standards, then this is probably not the right time for you to be within our organization. But when folks get it together, by all means, you can come back and work with us. Open hiring, what we get rid of are the barriers. We don't get rid of the standards for any type of a workplace. So I just want to make sure folks understand that open hiring does not equal no standards. And the other piece of that, when we talk about wraparound support, again, that those are kind of social service terms, human services terms that folks like to use, whether it's the employment path maker or whatever support we give to our employees. That's just good benefits. Those are just good perks to have on a job. That's just good HR. Taking care of your employees should not be a revolutionary concept. Making sure that they're being supported with training and mental health services, particularly in this environment. That's one thing that COVID has shown us is you need to take care of your employees. You need to make sure that they feel safe. They need to know that the buildings or the environments that they're going into, they're feeling safe. So it's up to us as business leaders to make sure we're doing that and we're communicating that to our employees. So to me, the things that Sara had outlined, that's just a good benefits package. Those are just good perks to have on the job. So I just wanted to make sure we could talk about that further because we get that question a lot. On the turnover piece, again, this is a tough job. Let's make no mistake about it. We're very clear on what folks are getting into, and that's part of the open hiring is making sure folks understand the job, understand that you're going to be working long hours, understand that you're going to be standing, understand it could be a hot environment. It is a bakery, and understand you're going to be lifting 50-pound bags of sugar and flour. This is not easy. This is manufacturing. It's just, food processing, all of those things. It's a tough job. If you look at our folks, last year, we took a look at the numbers. If I had 70 folks working last year, 50 of them stuck with us. And 20, for whatever reason, and it was probably half and half, voluntary as well as involuntary, left us. And that meant we had to go back to the list and start all over again and get folks in. So, that was about a 25%, turnover rate, if you want to look at it that way. But it's manufacturing. And the great thing about that, why did those 50 stay, is because they were a returning citizen, perhaps. They were homeless, perhaps. They were dealing with a domestic violence issue or whatever the issue might be. And someone gave them a chance and they're going to stick with us. The numbers that Sara gave you, the body shop, you're reducing their turnover rate by almost 2/3. Why is that? Because folks finally had a chance of employment. They finally had the opportunity to change their lives and turn things around. They're going to stick with employers like that. So when you give that type of opportunity to someone who wants it, who needs it, and is desperate for it, they are going to reward you with their commitment to your organization and to doing a good job. So I love the turnover question, but I always want to make sure folks, one, understand that, we're a manufacturer just like any other manufacturer in terms of the challenges of the job, but the commitment of the people because of your hiring practices is what will make that difference. And the other thing I would just say is, remember the folks that we're dealing with. Had it not been for Greyston, had it not been for a body shop or any of the pilots that are going on in the Netherlands, these folks would not have had a job, but we gave them an opportunity. And as I know CEOs, I came from corporate as well. I mean, you get judged on turnover rates, but we also get judged on what we're doing for our communities where we operate. And that is the whole point of stakeholder capitalism, is it not? Yes, we have to make sure we deliver a product, a profit and a quality product, or we won't be around to employ anybody. But we also want to make sure that, we're saying to the areas and the context that we operate in is we appreciate you as well. And this is our contribution to society in terms of giving folks access to employment. And to me, that's the best economic development package that there is to give somebody a job.
Thank you for those robust responses to the questions. And one came into me privately here, and I'll read it. It says, many of the RFPs, especially for financial firms, ask about our screening process. So it sort of bakes discrimination into the responses to an RFP, you know, to have to justify how hard you're screening people who are going to be interfacing with some other firm. Does that ever come up for you? Or James is asking, you know, maybe we could open that up to see if other people have dealt with that as well.
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
James, do you want to take yourself off mute and
or you could just, is it in the chat? Is it in the chat box or not?
It's to me privately, so I read it, but
okay.
You could explain a little bit.
We're a firm that manages other people's money, and we process health claims, and a lot of our clients' RFPs to us ask detailed questions about our screening processes and how we vet people who will be handling their money. And it just seems like all of their questions are baked in with a slant to make sure that we screen out anyone who's had anything, even like a misdemeanor. You know, they want to screen them out. So how do we overcome that with our own hiring processes in response to our clients? That's kind of
yeah, well, and Sarah, you can jump in on this, but I think you made the first step is asking that question. I mean, that's part of the mind shift is how do we overcome it? I had a company I think it was 2 days ago. They had somebody working with them for about 2 years now. They just found out that there was a high-level sex offender, and they'd been there for 2 years, went through a process, went through screening, and now they found out they have a sex offender working there. And he's doing a good job, P.S. And now they're concerned because they found out this issue about him. But they'd been working there for 2 years and doing a good job. So one, what kind of screening process did you have that he somehow got through the door? But two, he served his time to society. So that's the first question. They served their time, they're done. And now they're looking to contribute and to work and to do a good job and to prove themselves. And why not give them that opportunity? There's no other way to tackle some of those questions because a lot of them are getting to your point, James, is, how do we get rid of all those people, no matter what the issue is, if they had some type of justice involvement, how do we screen them out? Why, if they've already served their time and if they're already looking to do a good job? But as you can see, even with the best of background checks and all the other screening that you go through, some people still do make it through the door, but they also do a good job. What's the problem?
Wouldn't you rather that person employed than trying to find income through other means? Yeah. But that's a tough one. I mean, I think we in our efforts of like who to pilot this with, we're looking for places where the barriers are lower, right? Where it's these distribution jobs are a good example of that. Our hope as we try and build this movement is that we can build a body of evidence to show that this works and to hopefully move the needle so that the industries, finance is one of them, that are harder to move, can look at that evidence and say, okay, well, why have we been doing this way? Yeah. And then there's regulatory constraints in certain industries as well, or federal contractors. We're just gonna, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add, and Glenn had mentioned, throw out some statistics earlier about, the incarceration rate here in the U.S. Other studies show that if someone returning to society, they don't get a job within the first 90 days, they're going back. And the question is, what are they going back for? And what's that cost to society? The cost of that, whatever the crime they commit, the cost to incarcerate them. If they do come back, what's the cost for public assistance? What are all of those costs to society for that person recommitting the crime? And what's the cost to the business that you're investing in? How are they going to operate in those communities? If everybody's going to jail, everybody's committing crimes in their area, there's another quality of life issue that, we have to talk about. However, if you employ them and give them a job, what's the benefit to society? You know, what's the economic multiplier to society when we can give those same folks a job and not have them go back, save us money in public assistance costs, save us money on incarceration costs, and P.S., they're going to be paying taxes, they're going to be contributing to society, they're going to be spending money in communities that are probably already challenged.
Absolutely.
So my experience in corporate America, well, I've been here 20 years now, so I've had a few different roles. And it's funny, to your point, Joe, about certain, exclusion practices designed to keep out bad behavior, right? It's like corporate America is this gated community, where there's walls around it. Yeah, I've seen some very bad behavior inside the walls, to your point, that completely makes a fallacy of any filtering whatsoever. So it's a really good point. And the other point about the cost of incarceration, we spend more on incarceration than we do on tertiary education. So clearly that's a scale that needs more attention as well.
So there's a trio of things people are curious about that all kind of relate. One is recruitment, and I believe Sara was saying that the proactive expense of that is just not part of what you do, but clarifying what you do for recruitment, what you do for onboarding, and what you do to help people get ahead and promote either within the company or possibly among your partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here's our recruitment strategy. We hire people and they tell other people that they've been hired. That's how we do it. We don't post anywhere. We don't have ads anywhere. Literally, you could have a whole family. I think we actually do have a whole family working at the bakery. You'll have, a parent and a child. You might have a grandparent and a grandchild working at our bakery. That's how we promote. We do have partnerships, obviously, with our local Department of Social Services, Department of Corrections, probation. But for the most part, and this is the same for the workforce development training that we provide at the foundation, it's just folks telling other folks. And that's how we do it. I mean, we have a list, I was saying earlier, a waiting list of over 500 people. And that average wait could be 6 months. So we don't spend a lot of money because we really don't need to. And in an environment where we have a 17% unemployment rate, at least as of last month, that's actually low, because I'm wondering why there aren't more people on that list. But at this point, we don't spend any money, and we rely on the people that we've employed, the people that we employ now, and the people that we've employed to get the word out, because it's worked pretty well for almost 40 years.
So can I add to that?
Yeah.
I think we've been here. We've been here for 40 years. So it spreads by word of mouth, but we have been here for some time. And so I think when we launched the pilot with the body shop, I was sort of curious, like, would that same kind of word of mouth work there? Now they had a staffing agency that was doing outreach, but what was interesting is to see is how quickly it did spread. You had employees telling their friends and their families. You had, people calling up saying, I heard, I'm asking for a friend that maybe you're not doing background check, yeah, come on by. It happened very quickly. And then the other thing, though, is that they did want to do more proactive outreach to reach people that weren't necessarily becoming aware of jobs there through their traditional recruitment practices. And so what the staffing agency did that was very much kind of bought into this whole thing was they had a bus, they call it the career coach, that they normally just kind of put out in front of the employer. And they were actually driving the bus to affordable housing developments, to community centers, to places where people might, they could reach people who wouldn't otherwise know about these jobs or know that they could attain these jobs. So, when the other companies, I think, are getting creative with how they reach a broader pool of talent. Joe, you want to talk about onboarding and promotion?
Yeah, so the onboarding, as I said, it's an apprenticeship. It lasts about 6 to 9 months. So we just take you through the entire operations. You'll be trained in all of our, goods manufacturing principles and practices. You'll be trained understanding your benefit package. You'll have a session with most of our staff from R&D, the employment path maker, and just understanding what things are available at our foundation. So we provide, workforce development training where folks can get, nationally recognized credentials and certifications in different fields, whether it's security guard, building and construction, trade safety, customer service, culinary, and we provide job development services as well. So those are offered to all of our employees. And before I was president and CEO, I was the vice president of programs and partnerships here. And what we had started to do was to develop more what I'm calling anchor employers, so that as folks do 2 to 3 years at the bakery, if they choose, we want to move them on to other jobs, higher levels, higher pay. Because if we start with the premise that they wouldn't have gotten a job but for Greyston, now that they've worked, proven themselves, let's see where else they can go. What other interests do they have? We will train you. We will help you with job development, and then we'll move you on. We've developed great partnerships with St. John's Riverside, which is our local hospital here, with our local housing authority. They have maintenance jobs, security jobs, all different types of jobs available that are in the $16 to $18 range starting with benefits and union membership. So those are the types of programs we're putting in place. And folks will promote, and as they do well, we do have increments. We don't pay the minimum wage. We pay more than the minimum wage as a starting salary, but folks also have access to bonuses. We do quarterly bonuses as we meet our quarterly production targets and goals. And on average, I would say our bakers make, between 15 to 17% more than their peers in New York State when you look at other food processors and like jobs, similarly situated jobs. So the pay is very good. And I would say for a population that probably wouldn't have had access to this, they're doing very well. But I look at this as the start and not the end. Unless folks really, if you want to work here for the rest of your life, awesome. But if you want to do something else, that's what we want to have the conversation with our folks, working with our employment pathmaker and our workforce development team to see what's the next step for you. And we'd be more than happy to see folks move on. And I'll say the hospital in particular, they took about 25% of our clients, of my placements last year, which was just about 100. 25% of our clients went to the hospital and worked there. So this is the kind of ecosystem we would love to create and get more employers doing that and helping us move folks into different fields. In terms of the supervisor, I saw one question about that. The only supervisor that was once an apprentice is, and you might have seen him on our YouTube with my predecessor, Dion Drew. He started out as an apprentice and is now supervisor and making a very good salary. Been with us probably 10 years now. But has an amazing story. And if you just Google Dion Drew YouTube or Upworthy, you'll hear his story. It's just amazing. I could not find a job when he got out of prison, and no one would give him a chance. But Greyston did. Now he's a supervisor. Now he owns a home. I think he says he has 3 bank accounts now and Aflac and all of this stuff. So he's just, as happy as he can be. So those are the opportunities that, folks have. But the idea, again, good HR is to give folks training. We do training in a lot of different areas, whether it's financial literacy, just other soft skills that folks need to have in any job. We provide that to our team. So we believe it's good to have that robust availability of these types of benefits so that folks can move on or do better in the positions that they already hold.
Marna, one of our board members, is pointing out that some companies have a baked-in high turnover rate because the work they ask people to do is physically very difficult. So it's potentially plausible that they could institute open hiring and then decrease their turnover rate by greater loyalty. Would that be fair?
Yeah, potentially decrease, and to the earlier point, don't spend so much time, energy, and money on screening people when you still have such a large turnover rate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also have to ask yourself, why the turnover rate? Is it because of the job? Yes, the job is hard, but are there other issues that folks are going through? Because these are entry-level positions, so we don't know folks' situation. And that's the whole point of the employment pathmaker. Find out what the situation is. Are you not coming to work because, you're being abused at home and there's a domestic violence situation, or you need childcare and you can't leave your kid at home? Like, why is the turnover? And let's tackle that and then talk about what needs to be invested in.
Gavin, do you have responses, I'm sure, to all of this.
I think it's amazing. It's great how everything fits together, in a nice, a nice package and supports people all the way through. And, it's open, it's welcoming, it's helping, it's nurturing, and all the way through. And that you've got those partners that help to, foster people out to at some point, and that's a great thing too. And is that what you guys are trying to do in Rochester, New York too, is to set up an ecosystem like that of companies, somebody starts it and then pass people along, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's sort of two sides of it. There's that ecosystem of like, how do you move people around and kind of level load when, especially those that have seasonal demand for labor.
Yeah.
The other piece of the infrastructure that we want to create is this path making side of things, like the wraparound support is sort of the industry term, because we've been telling businesses, find your local provider, social service agencies, CBOs that you can partner with. But it's really often just not in the wheelhouse of your average business to build those kinds of nonprofit partnerships. But we've been doing it for a long time. And so the idea is, and it may not necessarily make sense for every employer to invest in that kind of infrastructure if it can get shared across a network of employers. And so that's also kind of what we're building up there is an infrastructure to support more employers adopting the model.
Yeah, I think that, that sounds like that makes a lot of sense too, because I was imagining myself as a small manufacturing company, 15 or 20 employees, and I'm listening to like all the stuff that you're talking about, thinking like, wow, that'd be great. But personally, I wouldn't have enough bandwidth, I don't think, to be able to educate employees about all those things or find those programs or set the things up. But if I could tie into a group of other companies that were all sharing the same resources and all supporting the same ethic, then that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I did see a question about background checks. We do not do background checks at all, so we don't know what the backgrounds are of our employees, but definitely have talked to other companies where they do the background check, but then they're willing to kind of work with the person, not work with, make an assessment, and so that's part of the way there, but we would obviously argue, do you really need it in the first place?
Yeah.
Glenn, how do you want to use the remainder based on any other things that we need to cover here?
Well, I sort of made an agreement with Joe and Sara is that we would help them overcome this stigma that wraps around the open hiring, and anything we as conscious capitalists can do to break down those myths and spread the virtues of the open hiring practice. And I think one of the things that we can do, because one of our other clients at Red Rock is with an association of manufacturers in Connecticut, is that we can certainly share these best practices with them, because I'm thinking that there are certain sectors that are more appropriate to, where there's repetitive tasks involved, which sort of leans into some of the manufacturing sector. I know a friend of mine also runs a street sweeping business, and he's been recruiting this way for many years. So he doesn't even know it's a thing, but he's been doing it because he just thinks that these guys deserve a second chance, and that's his unpublished statement of purpose. So I mean, I'll just open it up to anyone else on the call that to sort of say, well, how else can we help people that are trying to re-engage into the community? Because one of the biggest thing they need is work, is employment. And how can we do that as a team? And particularly now, post-COVID, when populations of colour, black and brown communities are being hit disproportionately harder than other communities. So it's up to people in this room to help bring solutions to that problem. So I'll just sort of open it up there, and I'd love to hear from anyone on the call to see if they've got any other ideas as to what are the sort of myths that we can break here.
And one of the things I'll just add, Glenn, if folks want to learn more, if you go to our website, greyston.org, Sara and the team did an amazing job providing a Open Hiring 101 cyber seminar. So if you go to our website and just check that out and share it with other folks that are within your sphere of influence, that's the first step. And just look at the site in general, but there's like a ton of information there. But if you just go through that seminar, it's only just under an hour. It would be great to for folks to do that and learn more about open hiring and how they could use it. And you'll get to hear from the body shop too and see firsthand how they experienced open hiring.
Someone wanted to ask privately, do you do any sort of drug screening or monitoring once they're on the job?
Only if there's a situation that warrants it, but it's not part of the employment process. And I saw another question regarding how do we measure our impact. Several different ways we look at it. And again, this was something I was doing when I was Vice President of Programs and Partnerships. I mean, one, we'd just like to look at, what's the economic impact of us just being here. So if you look at the annualized wages of what we pay our bakers in the area, just the wages, and not including fringe, you're talking over a $3 million impact. And then we also look at, the opportunities that we give out throughout the year. And so literally hundreds of opportunities times, 38 years is something we look at. And we look at the stories too, because there's the qualitative piece of this. Just today, we went to one of our anchor employer partners, who's actually, the company is owned by one of our former board members and treasurer. We got to celebrate a guy who celebrated 6 years of employment at a company called Paraco Gas. He was once our baker at the bakery. He was in prison for 26 years, went to prison at the age of 19, went through our path-making program at our bakery, and now he's celebrating 6 years as a dock worker, making in probably the mid to high 20s at this company called Paraco Gas. It's that kind of story.
Wow.
So it's just amazing to see that. And there are many more, and like I said, Dion Drew, those types of stories, because you really like to weave together just the transformation that takes place from the moment they find us to where they are now, some that stay with us, but others that move on to bigger and better things. That's how we measure it. We look at the average wage placement of our workforce development team. We look at that. We look at the retention, how many people stay for 30, 60, 90 plus days as they leave our workforce development team and find jobs elsewhere. We look at all of those things. And I'm like, our average wage placement, it's 25% above the minimum wage for a New York State minimum wage, mind you. So $15, well over $15 an hour is what some of our folks are getting placed at. And that to me, that's incredible, because again, these were folks that probably would not have had an opportunity but for Greyston. So many different ways we look at it. There's an economic impact, but there's a qualitative, personal story behind a lot of the people that we place. So we like to celebrate those when we get them. I didn't see any other questions.
Thank you, Sara, for dropping your contact information into the chat. So there's a way for anyone to directly follow up on anything that we didn't have a chance to cover.
Please do. And I saw a comment about Amazon warehouses. If anyone has a contact there, we would love to pilot this with them.
Talk about a distribution center.
Yeah.
You should connect her to Mayor Frida. He seems to have all the juice with them, right?
Yeah, we can help you there.
Mayor of North Haven.
Okay.
How about Stu Leonard's? Do they do anything with you guys?
We actually we were at an event with Stu Leonard's, was it 2 weeks ago, Sara? We did connect with Stu himself and members of his human resources team. So we're hoping to get something going with them as well. They're a big employer in Yonkers.
Yeah.
So we were at Greyston's a couple of weeks ago, and we interviewed Sara and Joe and a couple of other team members and put a 8-minute video together, and I just dropped the YouTube link into the chat because it just gives it a little bit more color as to, or a bit of texture, I should say, to different team members and their different perspectives, and also some interior shots of what goes on inside the bakery. We couldn't get in there on the day, but we used some B-roll from other source. So I think it's a good resource because it tells a story in an 8-minute clip. And if you want to share that freely to anyone that you think might be supportive of this idea. And I like what Sara said in the clip, and it's like, it's not about abolishing a whole department. It's just about doing some things a little bit differently. And you can, it's not about adding more stuff. It's about actually reducing stuff. So it's a simpler thing.
Yeah, eliminating barriers. That makes a lot of sense. And it actually, one of the things that initially I was thinking is like, oh, okay, well, this only can really work with certain kinds of jobs, you know, entry level, you know, warehousing, manufacturing jobs, things like that. But as I thought about it more, it's like, no, you could have somebody had, you know, trouble or has got issues or whatever, and you know, they're, you know, they've got a legal education or you know, some other sort of training that you need in a particular company, and you could just look for, you know, do you have those credentials? And if you do, then great, and we're not going to ask you any other questions, and just leave it like that. And because you might end up getting more people in that otherwise, you know, would there was some other barrier to them getting a job. They've got the credentials that are needed, but there's other stuff in their life that's just getting in the way. So this is it's a cool thing to get used almost any place, really.
Have you helped, Joe, question for you, have you found that this open hiring has helped establish the Greyston brand in its point of difference with other bakery products and brands? Has it been a good differentiator for you?
I would say it's been a good differentiator in general. I mean, because no one does what we do in the way that we do it. And again, we want more folks to do that, but it's a huge differentiator just in terms of the model itself, who we partner with, Ben & Jerry's, the poster children for activism, and all the other different causes that they sign up for. So it folks, when they hear the story, the brownie tastes all the more better when they hear how people are hired and, you know, the stories that are behind it. Clearly, it's not like any other brownie that you've had. And I would say it's better than any other brownie. One, it's because it just tastes so good, but then who made it and the quality behind it, which, like I said, these are high standards that we have to adhere to. So it's a huge differentiator for us.
It's right on the back of the packaging, so we definitely lead with it.
Yeah. And I should say, just as a footnote to the video, that the B-roll that you have was pre-COVID, so you will not see people with masks and physical distancing. It was pre-COVID, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Is Greystone doing anything as far as growth and expanding what you do and providing more opportunities, or are you just encouraging other organizations to adopt your methods?
And when you say growth and expanding, you're talking about the production facility itself?
The production facility, expanding other places, opening another production facility, or?
Yeah, I would say that's the 5 to 10 year plan. Because obviously we want to see our products elsewhere, and we want to do more. I mean, we have a pretty strong R&D group. I mentioned the vegan birthday cake brownie, blondie that's come out. Clearly we want to do more. And that was actually something that was looked at a few years ago, but just in terms of strategic priorities, that's probably a longer term goal for us, but the more opportunities, the better, obviously.
Obviously, gluten-free products and stuff would be really cool.
We get that one a lot.
Yeah.
Take a quick poll on that one. I think we saw some thumbs up there, Joe. So I just want to thank Joe and Sara for being so generous with their great ideas, their terrific practices, and how to put them into action. And it's been a real inspiration for me to get a deeper understanding. Again, I've heard some of it before, but just really want to thank you guys for being here for us and sharing your good work. And I will just take a quick switch to next week's event, because next week we have this incredible organization called Narrative 4. He's an old friend of mine who's one of the early instigators of the movement. They're a global brand driven by artists, shaped by educators, and led by students. And they do this fantastic version of storytelling through empathy and they have been working around the globe in some of the most troubled places. I spoke to Lee one day. I said, "Where have you been?" He said, "Oh, Palestine." So he's known for visiting some of our most troubled hotspots around the world and using this well-defined storytelling way of developing empathy across borders and across cultures. So he'll be our guest next week, and he's promised to bring in some of his students as well. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking his purpose and some of the results that he's achieved just through telling a good story. So we hope that you on the call can join us next week, same time, same place, and continue this story of being a conscious capitalist and all its virtues. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Okay.
And
Bye-bye.
thanks, guys. That was fantastic. Really, really, really good. Just amazing.
Thank you.
See you next week.